It's My Nerd World, a Star Wars show, and on this week's episode, the passing of an icon, as we lost James Earl Jones this week. Also, in Star Wars news, is Ezra going to appear in the Mandalorian and Grogu film, and what does that mean for the overall storytelling of the Mando-verse by Dave Filoni? As always, thank you so much for checking out this week's episode. Let's get to it.
Nothing will stand in our way.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
I will finish what you started.
Who are you? I'm no one.
There are stories about what happened.
It's true. All of it.
The Force. It's calling to you.
My Nerd World.
Just let it in.
And welcome to it. I'm your host, Jon Justice, and I'm glad you're here for another episode. As always, if you want to email me, TalkShowNerd@gmail.com, and if you happen to be enjoying this on YouTube, you can leave a comment there as well. If you want to support My Nerd World, and I hope you will, and you enjoy reading or listening to science fiction as much as you do watching it, I hope you'll take a moment at some point, once you're done listening to this week's episode, or while you're listening to this week's episode, and head on over to Amazon.com and check out the EMBARK, E-M-B-A-R-K, science fiction adventure series. I wrote this series because of my love of Star Wars, space operas, and the storytelling of George Lucas and what he was inspired by, almost as George Lucas was inspired by The Hero's Journey, Joseph Campbell, and the myths of our past. I was inspired by the journeys and the stories and the myths that George Lucas created, and hoping to sort of, use the example that he used in being inspired by George Lucas. That's why I wrote this series, and I'll give you more details at the end of this week's episode.
We are the spark that'll light the fire that'll burn the First Order down.
And he was certainly a spark in the world of entertainment. James Earl Jones passed away this week at age 93. To say I was a fan of James Earl Jones would be an understatement. His contribution to Star Wars cannot be overstated. But not just in Star Wars, but in films that I absolutely love, playing James Greer in a few of the Tom Clancy, Jack Ryan movies, The Hunt for Red October, most specifically, of course, the other voice acting that he's done, but also throughout his career, how open he was to embracing Star Wars, making appearances in pop culture where you wouldn't expect to see him. I finally watched The Big Bang Theory in its entirety over the course of the past year or so, having never watched that series, and he has an appearance on there, playing himself and talking about how much he loves Star Wars, and having consumed almost every single documentary imaginable relating to the franchise. James Earl Jones appears in many of those, talking about his role as the voice of Darth Vader, and has continued to provide his voice to Star Wars even up until the time of his passing, including, my understanding is, he's given permission for Lucasfilm and whoever owns the right to Star Wars to use his voice in perpetuity. So the man lived a full life and certainly made his mark on society and pop culture. Certainly will be missed. One of the moments that I enjoy the most from James Earl Jones in hearing from him as an actor is during the Empire of Dreams documentary, one of my favorites relating to the original trilogy. And he's talking about the reveal of Darth Vader being Luke's father. Now, of course, as the story has been told many times, this was an incredibly guarded and well-hid secret, well-kept secret in the making of The Empire Strikes Back. on set when that scene was filmed between Vader and Mark Hamill. David Prowse, of course, was in the suit, and he is doing the lines as written, but they weren't the lines that would actually be used when James Earl Jones did the voice for Star Wars after filming was the voice of Darth Vader after filming was complete. It was only after filming was complete, and he dubbed in his voice as Darth Vader, where he said the line, "No, I am your father." Of course, so many people get that one wrong, saying, "Luke, I am your father." He says, "No, I am your father." James Earl Jones, in that documentary, explains that he didn't believe it at the time. He thought that it was a lie and was asking a question heading into Return of the Jedi. How are they going to play out that lie? I just thought it was so interesting and spoke to how strong a story George Lucas had created, along with the writers of the screenplay, that nobody could possibly fathom that Darth Vader would be Luke's father. And I've said this before in previous episodes, but I'll bring it up again now, that as a kid, that was the driving factor for me. I know it's a part of the story, but I think other people grab on to different things. And while I love the spaceships, I've talked about that over and over again, how I love the technology and the spaceships, and even, lifted ideas and wanted to create that same lived-in universe in the writing of my science fiction series. It was the hero's journey that ultimately, made those movies so compelling and accessible. Having a close relationship with my own father, I remember watching Star Wars, as a kid, as a really young kid, but even as I got older, and thinking about how difficult that must have been for Luke to not have his father. When meeting Obi-Wan Kenobi, and he begins to get a bit of a background of his father in those moments, and those stories that would spin off, of course, from just those few scenes of dialogue in Obi-Wan Kenobi's hut. But feeling the pain that Luke Skywalker felt and how difficult that must have been for him, because he never knew his father, and that's what he wanted more than anything. And then going into the Empire Strikes Back only to discover that the most evil person in that galaxy far, far away was actually his dad. Of course, I'm simply speaking to the power of that moment and its cementing in pop culture history, right? It is the big turn. But as a kid, just going, it's incredible. How can this be possible? And of course, to see the way things played out in Return of the Jedi. It still is just absolutely fantastic storytelling. And I just always thought it was interesting that James Earl Jones himself didn't believe and couldn't believe that would be the case. So rest in peace, James Earl Jones, and thank you so much for the entertainment that you have provided to so many of us.
This is not going to go the way you think.
There are some reports out now, and I pulled this from Star Wars Meg on YouTube, another great channel that I follow quite a bit, along with my friend Star Wars Santa. She had a report on this. This is where I found out that the actor who plays Ezra said at a recent convention that he'll be doing some Star Wars filming, Star Wars work, sometime within the next year, which actually coincides with the timetable of the Mandalorian and Grogu film to be released in 2026, more so than the potential start of the filming for Ahsoka Season 2, as was mentioned by the actress who plays Sabine in the Ahsoka series. I'm incredibly disappointed that it looks like it's going to be quite a long time until we get Ahsoka Season 2, being a huge fan of that series, and in my opinion, is the best storytelling of live-action streaming that we've received from Disney Plus and Lucasfilm. This has me excited, though, about Ezra's inclusion in The Mandalorian and Grogu. Perhaps this is hinting at The Mandalorian and Grogu potentially tying more directly into Ahsoka, where My guess was that The Mandalorian and Grogu was going to be something more of an offshoot film that will tie in to the Mandoverse, which is supposed to lead to not only Ahsoka Season 2, but a final film to wrap up all the storytelling within the Mandoverse. The stories taking place after Return of the Jedi. Perhaps with Ezra's inclusion in The Mandalorian and Grogu, maybe it'll tie more directly into Ahsoka, and Season 2 will be something different, wherein perhaps The Mandalorian and Grogu, along with Ezra, are off to retrieve Ahsoka and Sabine from Peridia and that other galaxy far, far away. This is what I would love to really see happen. I love The Mandalorian. I thought the third season of The Mandalorian had some weak spots, whereas season 1 and 2 were fantastic. I do love the mythology of the Mandalorian culture. And while we did get a bit of your Jedi and Force, certainly with Grogu in his Force abilities, but the episode that included Luke Skywalker, I should say episodes, that included Luke Skywalker in both the seasons 1 and 2, I would love to see these characters coming together to tell a wider story relating to the Force and the aspects of the Star Wars storytelling that we love so much. You have a compelling cast of characters in this timeline post the original trilogy that, in my view, could really serve to bring back more of the magic that was created by Han, Luke, and Leia and Chewbacca in the original series. It's part of the reason why I love Ahsoka so much. The Ahsoka series, to me, really feels like Star Wars from that original trilogy perspective of these characters, telling a rather broad story in terms of locale. We'll go off to a completely different galaxy, but we have the political intrigue that takes place, and it's given to us in doses just big enough on Coruscant with Hera and what she's dealing with the new Republic Council in the situation that is emerging relating to the potential threat of Thrawn's return. In the meantime, you have this much smaller, intimate story taking place in the efforts to go and retrieve Ezra from that other galaxy, which ended, when he was sent there from the end of the Rebels series. There's also some dark themes that I'd like to see explored relating to Sabine. I absolutely love that character. I think Natasha Lee Bordizio does a fantastic job playing Ahsoka. She's probably my favorite character of the Ahsoka series. Actually, I take that back. She is my favorite character of the Ahsoka series. I love Hera as well. But I just think Sabine's a really compelling character. But there's dark side themes that can be explored as she goes and taps into the Force. As we saw at the end of the Ahsoka series, she's able to use the Force quite effectively, even being able to assist Ezra as he makes it on board Thrawn's Star Destroyer before escaping from the planet. If they further addressed the spoken off-screen events and concerns that Ahsoka had, and the rationale as to why Ahsoka stopped training Sabine as a Jedi, I think this could prove to be some really interesting storytelling, especially if we begin to explore the Mortis characters in the son, the daughter, and the father that were hinted in the final episode of Ahsoka, and we talked about the rumors on last week's episode. I don't think it's any... Oh, how do I want to word this? I don't think that it's a small thing that Dave Filoni had Sabine making the choices that she made in the Ahsoka series that got everybody essentially in trouble, with her desire to go find Ezra really superseding the larger issue of protecting the galaxy by enabling Thrawn's return. And right now, this is currently the only line of storytelling in the immediate future for the saga that can explore these themes relating to the Force, both dark and light, that could harken back to what made the prequels and the original trilogy so special. The sequel trilogy as well. But I just think that in the modern era, especially relating to the live-action streaming series, Dave Filoni is the best storyteller. I think the storytelling in Rebels is absolutely fantastic, and Dave took what he was doing in Rebels and really made it an extension of Rebels in when he created Ahsoka. So the addition of Ezra potentially with the Mandalorian and Grogu has me really, really excited at the potential of what that movie could be, more so than I was before. I feel like this is a bit of a reset. This is the safest bet for Lucasfilm and Disney right now, this Mandalorian and Grogu film. We're not hearing about the Daisy Ridley post the Rise of Skywalker film anymore. It hasn't been mentioned in any of the commentary that's come out from Lucasfilm or Disney relating to future projects. I'm really not all that interested in the James Mangold centuries before, or however long it's supposed to be before even the High Republic era of the Dawn of the Jedi. I'm sure I'll feel different when I get more storytelling or visuals to go and look at, but right now that doesn't excite me. I've mentioned this many times. I'm always sort of looking forward in the timeline. I do like this era between Return of the Jedi and the sequel trilogy that we've been exploring, and I think Dave Filoni is creating something really special here, despite some of the missteps with the book of Boba Fett. But again, the inclusion of Ezra has me kind of excited, and I think that actor did a fantastic job translating the animated character to the live action, even though he didn't have to. You know, I think the Sabine version in animation is a little bit different than the Sabine live-action version, although I really enjoy them both, and the same thing rings true for Hera as well. So, again, I'm excited for The Mandalorian and Grogu, where I wasn't as excited before, and I hope that this speculation rings true. I want to mention one more thing before I wrap up the show today, and I kind of wrestled with whether or not I wanted to bring it up, but there's an observation to be made here, so I figured I'd share it anyways. I'm not going to go all the way down this rabbit hole, but there's this interesting riff, I don't know what else to call it, that is developed within the Star Wars fandom. There's a handful in the wake of the cancellation of The Acolyte. There's a handful of Star Wars content creators that took it upon themselves to put together essentially what amounts to a fandom press release asking that YouTube go and demonetize certain Star Wars commentator platforms on YouTube because of their negativity towards The Acolyte. Now, they make claims of hate and racism, although from the looking into the issue that I've done, there really is only like one specific report of one particular content creator making a rather derogatory remark that could remotely be considered racist in any way, shape, or form. It really seems as if the crux of the complaints coming from these particular fans of The Acolyte, who are also Star Wars creators, is simply because there are content creators out there making money expressing their negativities toward the Disney Star Wars era and The Acolyte specifically. And in my opinion, that is utterly ridiculous. Listen, people are entitled to their opinion. You don't have to like it. I don't have to like, and I don't a lot of it, a lot of the negativity that is surrounding Star Wars. I don't agree with a lot of it. I think there is a lot of accurate, objective, and a lot of subjective criticism that's out there. But it's also subjective, meaning people are entitled to their opinions. And if people are willing to go and consume that content, that negative Star Wars content, that's on the people that are consuming that negative Star Wars content. For a group of other Star Wars fans to essentially say, we don't like that they have an opinion that's different than ours and we feel like YouTube should go and demonetize them. I've actually heard some people make comments that they just need to divest, pulling from other recent real world controversies. It really is quite fascinating because this is a group of Star Wars fans who I don't personally have an issue with. I just think that they completely jumped the shark on this particular issue. And they don't even themselves see the parallels of what they've created in their frustration and in their complaints to YouTube. YouTube has so far responded with essentially a shoulder shrug, palms up, head tilt. They're not violating any of our rules. But here you have a group of Star Wars fans that say that they're incredibly positive and they don't like the negativity that's surrounded the Acolyte, and they contribute that as to being one of the main factors as to why that show was canceled and there won't be a second series, when in reality it simply comes down to the fact that the storytelling wasn't up to par for a lot of people, understandably, and hardly anybody watched the show compared to the other Star Wars streaming content. But the point I wanted to make was this. Isn't it funny that here you have a group of people who claim to be doing the right thing by their own view, who are wanting to go and do what? Essentially silence any sort of level of dissent. Now, they say they don't want them deplatformed. They just want them demonetized. But ultimately, that's because they know that would be taking it a step too far. And that by simply demonetizing them, they hope that those voices will essentially silence themselves. Is it just me? Or does that sound a little bit like the attitude of the Empire and those that are involved in the dark side, where they feel like they're doing the right thing by going and imposing their will upon others? I find that rather interesting. From what I've seen of those individuals that are out there being negative towards Star Wars, they're simply going and expressing their opinion. They still watch those shows. They have to in order to express their opinion. Very, very interesting in my book. Just wanted to share that with you. It seems as if the right thing is actually happening. There's a relatively healthy amount of ratioing going on, backlash to those particular content creators that decided to make the leap and ask YouTube to go and demonetize those platforms. The criticism has been pretty harsh and pretty swift, and the fact that YouTube isn't doing anything about it is absolutely the right thing to happen. I do believe that all things work together for good, and in this case, something good will probably come out of this, and maybe people will have a better understanding of simply accepting other people's opinions and ignoring them if you don't go and like them. Hey, listen, before I wrap up, I think you'll like my science fiction space opera series, EMBARK. As Earth faces its end, the fight to rule the stars begins. When Taft Guardia agrees to help fellow starfighter pilot Keith Amaro, whom he's secretly in love with, investigate a cryptic message from her late aerospace engineer father, they embark on a mission to uncover the truth behind her father's mysterious death amid a looming planet-wide apocalyptic industrial catastrophe. With two rival megacorporations on the brink of interstellar war during the global evacuation, Taft and Keitha must race to uncover the key to saving humanity and each other from annihilation before it's too late. The first book is essentially a post-apocalyptic science fiction adventure that leads into a sprawling space opera epic. But each story in and of itself taps into their own individual genres. So the second book in my series, in my EMBARK series, is kind of a heist story. The third book is more of your sort of larger overall epic war, the Vanishing War. Book 4 in the series is a more of a fun comedic survival adventure, leading into book 4, The Rocket Queen, which is kind of an homage to, a bit like Skeleton Crew, an homage to the emblem stories of the 80s. You get into book number 6. Where are we at? 6. And book 6 is sort of more of a noir, mystery noir story, wrapping up with Battle Planet, which again sort of ends the story in another epic war, tale of war, I guess is the best way to describe it. Anyway, I'm doing a horrible job pitching my books this time around. I hope you'll head on over to Amazon.com and check them out. I tried to make each book unique while telling an exciting space opera saga. It is written for adults, but it's great for ages 11 plus in terms of content. Treat yourself, a friend, or a family member with science fiction, and you can pick up EMBARK, all the books in the series, but start with book 1, of course, in ebook, Kindle Unlimited, hardcover, paperback, and audiobook. If you like your science fiction space opera to be epic with some really cool technology, romance, and a lot of action, EMBARK is perfect for you on Amazon.com. Just search for EMBARK and Jon Justice. Thank you so much for checking out this week's episode. I hope wherever you are happy, you're healthy, and you're safe. And I'll talk to you again next week. Bye.
The Force will be with you, always.
My nerd world.